In this session, we're going to take a look at the circle tools within GeoGebra. Basically, the circle tools are collected together under the sixth icon in the toolbar at the top of the GeoGebra window. The most frequently used tool will probably be the circle with center through the point, or through a point. To use it, we simply find where we want our center, click. We have now a center point A, and as we drag the cursor away from point A, we form our radius, and a second click locates a point somewhere on the circumference of the circle. When we go back to our move tool, we find that we can move our point B, and if we do, we make the circle larger because our circle is defined in terms of a center point and some point on the circle. We can also move point A, and A moves, point B stays where it is, but the circle grows larger or smaller because, once again, the circle is defined in terms of the radius AB. If we want to move the entire circle, we can simply grab it anywhere on its circumference except for point B and drag that whole circle anywhere that we want to have it. That's the basic circle tool. The second circle tool is a circle with a center and a specific radius. We will choose that tool. Now we'll choose our center point, and a pop-up window is basically asking us, what do we want for a radius? So let's type in a 2. Apply or hit return, and we now have a circle with a radius of 2. Now let's see how this circle behaves compared to the first. If we click on point C, we notice that this time when we drag the circle, the circumference, radius, and diameter do not change. Only the location of the circle changes, because we define the circle in terms of a center point and a fixed radius. In this case, it's 2. We can change that if we wish, but that is how the circle will relate to its definition. Okay, the third tool, we have a circle through 3 points. We'll choose that tool. 3 points, as long as they're not in the same straight line, will determine a unique circle. So point D, point E, and now the circle is going to be determined as soon as we click. There's our third point, and we have a circle formed. Once again, let's see what happened. You might be able to anticipate now, since points D, E, and F are listed over here in the algebra window as free objects, we should be able to move any of them. We can move point D, we can move point E, we can move point F. The result in each case is to impact on the size of the circle. The circle, you notice, is itself identified as object E. We can move the whole circle by clicking somewhere on its circumference other than one of the 3 points that defines that circle. Let's use the undo command to clear our screen. Let's quickly go right back to the starting point. Those are the 3 circle tools, complete circles. Then we have some partial circle tools. The semicircle through 2 points. Click on a point, click a second point. I'm going to the right from my original point, and I get a upper semicircle. If I click and move to the left, I get a lower semicircle. Again, because A, B, C, and D are all free objects, I can change that semicircle. It will always be a semicircle. I can move the entire semicircle anywhere I wish, and the same thing applies to semicircle CD. Eliminating, going back to the original point. The next tool we'll take a look at under our circles pull-down menu is our circular arc with center through 2 points. Choose our tool. Our instructions tell us we need a center and 2 points on the arc. What's probably important here is making the connection between what point does what in terms of controlling our circular arc. Our first point is our center. So we now have a center A. Now we're going to go out a distance that we choose. This is now B. We have determined the radius of our circle. Now, as we move the cursor, we notice that we're forming an arc, depending on which direction we go in. The third point has one basic function, and that is to determine how large that arc is going to be. If I click, now I notice that point C does not lie right on the arc, and that's okay, because all that C does is determine where that arc ends. Picture mentally the radius going from center A through point C and stopping here at the end of the arc. This is a little clearer if we choose our Move tool. A was the center. We can move point A around. Notice that C does not move, but what does happen is that the end of the arc still lies on the radius that passes from point A through point C. And we can even make it come down so that it looks as if it's at the end. We can move point C. Again, all it determines is the size of that arc. We can make it into a full circle. If we start again, it just starts the arc over again. Point B can also be moved. Since point B is actually determining the original radius, it also has the effect of changing the size of the arc, independent of point C. The other end of the arc still is controlled by the location of C in relation to the center of the circle. Let's clear our screen. The next tool, right below this one, we have the circumcircular arc through 3 points. Sounds very similar, but it behaves a little differently. We'll choose the circumcircular arc. Now this time, there's point A, point B, but notice that we did not form a center at point A this time. The instructions tell us that we're picking 3 points on an arc. This is similar to the 3 points determining circle, but the third point determines how full that arc is going to be. If we go all the way and approach point A, we're up to a full circle. As we move point C back toward point B, it gives us a smaller sized arc in relation to the total of the possible circle that could be there. There's our point C. Now let's see how those points behave again. Point A was our first point, the end, one end of the arc. It can be moved about. The other points behave in accordance. Point B is the second of the points. We can move it about as well. And point C, the third point, all 3 points collectively determine the circle and the arc in this case. Again, point C and actually point A determine how large, how many degrees we have in our arc. Point B also controls that inadvertently. Its main impact is to control how the circle develops in terms of size. That, of course, in this case, changes the size of the arc as well when we measure in degrees. Clearing our screen one more time. Going down to our almost last group, the circular sector with a center through 2 points. Notice the terminology is almost the same as the circular arc, but this time we're going to get a sector. First point determines my center point. The second point determines my radius, and then notice that we are drawing a sector now instead of just an arc. Otherwise than that, they are basically behaving the same way. So here's my point C. Point C determines how many degrees we have in our sector. Point A is going to determine the center. Again, notice C doesn't have to be on the radius itself. Point A is our center point, and point B determines the size because its distance away from point A determines the radius of the sector. very similar to that, and we'll leave both up here in this case. Sorry, wrong menu. Now we'll come down to the circumcircular arc through 3 points. Okay, again, this is going to be 3 points on a sector, not a center point. Okay, there we have 2 points. The center point is a dependent position at this time, depends on where we put the point F. Okay, there is a point F. Now, we could make this look pretty much the same kind of an object as we have over to the right, but one is being controlled by 3 points on the circumference of a sector. The other one is being controlled by a center point, 1 point on the circumference, and a third point somewhere determining the size of the angle, the central angle of that sector. So 2 very similar appearing objects, but 2 very different ways of creating that object. We'll clear our screen one more time. Now, we have one last tool listed under the circles. This one's a very interesting one. It's one that many teachers and nearly all students know nothing about. Very interesting observation, however. It turns out that if we choose any 5 points, as long as they don't determine a straight line amongst any 3 or 4 of them, we will get a conic. Let's try it. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points. Well, we have a hyperbola. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have an ellipse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have a parabola. It's almost impossible for me to draw a perfect circle. I will probably get an ellipse. I'll try to draw a circle. Now, if we investigate that, we'll probably discover it is not a pure circle. In fact, this is object F. If we look in our window, we find that indeed it is not a perfect circle. We have an XY term here. We also, if I move my algebra window, we find that we definitely don't have a perfect circle there, but it looks pretty close. If we drag it, or drag a point away here, we definitely have an ellipse there, and it turns into hyperbola. If we keep moving it, we're back into having an ellipse again, and that's probably going to be the limitation on this particular group of objects. Very interesting principle that is a good one to raise hopefully a lot of curiosity among students. One last thing that we'll take a look at, and we're going to create a whole new window for this since we're getting quite cluttered. We bypassed tangents in our visit to one of the other windows, or one of the other tools, a little while back in another session. Let's draw a circle. We'll just pick the basic tool, circle the center through a point, and there we have a circle. Now we're going to go back to our 4th group and pick up the tangents tool. Now, the tangents tool tells us we need a point, then a circle, conic, or function. Okay, this will actually work with parabolas and other conics, but we're just going to stick with a circle for the basic demonstration here. So, let's pick a point. Let's choose the circle. And there we have tangents to the circle. The dynamic relationship exists. We can move point C. We maintain our tangents. We can move the circle. We maintain our tangents. We can change the diameter of that circle. We maintain our tangents. Everything remains as it was defined. We can also choose a tangent to a particular point on the circle rather than off the circle. So let's try that one more time. We choose our tangent tool, let's use point B on the circle, and the circle itself, and there is a tangent, in this case a single tangent, because we ask for a tangent to a specific point on that circle rather than from a point outside, which would generate two possibilities. And that concludes our investigation, at least of the basic properties of the circle-related drawing tools within the GeoGebra window.